All right, as the world braces for new tariffs that go into effect tomorrow, the relationship between the United States and its closest ally has become strained. Canada's new prime minister had a conversation with President Trump last week and later said there is a lot of work that needs to be done to build.
We're going to learn more about a congressional challenge to the first round of punishing tariffs again.
In the first major shock to the U.S., Canada's Ontario, the country's largest industrial province, has decided to slap a 25% tariff on electricity exports to the United States. At first glance, this may seem like a minor economic squabble, but the reality is much more severe. The U.S. has long relied on Canadian energy resources, particularly electricity, oil, and liquefied natural gas, LNG, making this move a direct challenge to the economic stability of its neighbor. The figures are staggering. Canada provides the U.S. with more than half of its crude oil imports, valued at over $70 billion annually. But that's not all. Canada's role in the U.S. energy market extends far beyond oil. During the winter months, many U.S. states rely heavily on Canadian LNG to meet their energy demands. If Ottawa decides to cut off these exports, it could lead to power shortages and blackouts in regions across the U.S., particularly in states that have not invested heavily in local energy production. This tariff isn't just a symbolic move, it's a direct power play. Canada's control over critical energy resources is its strongest leverage in this escalating trade war. And Ottawa has made it clear, if Washington continues with its trade war, Canada will not hesitate to use its energy resources as a weapon. The message is simple: play nice, or the lights could go out. The automotive industry is another front in this growing economic conflict. Canada has long been a critical supplier of auto parts and finished vehicles to the U.S. In 2024 alone, Canada exported over $58 billion worth of cars and parts to the U.S., making it a key player in the North American automotive sector. However, after Trump's 25% tariff on imported cars, Canada retaliated swiftly, and the repercussions are already being felt. One of the first retaliatory measures taken by Canada was to remove tax incentives for U.S. electric vehicles, particularly those produced by Tesla. Tesla, which has a significant market share in the U.S. electric vehicle market, could see the price of its cars skyrocket as a result of this move. This may seem like a minor policy shift, but the ramifications for the automotive sector are far-reaching. The U.S. car industry could see a rise in production costs, particularly in Detroit, where auto parts from Canada are essential to the manufacturing process. The potential for a parts shortage in U.S. auto plants is a very real threat. With car prices rising and production costs increasing, American consumers could be forced to pay significantly more for vehicles, especially those made with Canadian parts. But the effects don't stop there. The U.S. automotive sector could also face a parts crisis, as many components that are integral to car manufacturing are produced in Canada. This could result in production delays and a bottleneck in car manufacturing, all while consumer prices continue to climb. Prime Minister Mark Carney made it abundantly clear, Canada is no longer content to be a passive economic partner to the United States. The deep integration of our economies that once defined the U.S.-Canada relationship is officially over. From here on out, Canada will protect its interests, and if that means using tariffs as a weapon, so be it. Agriculture is another sector where the U.S.-Canada trade war is hitting hard. The U.S. and Canada share a massive agricultural trade relationship, with nearly $100 billion worth of goods flowing between the two nations annually. Among the products Canada exports to the U.S. are canola, wheat, dairy, and meat, products that are staples in the U.S. food market. But Canada is ready to strike back. Following Trump's tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, Canada has now targeted agricultural goods, especially canola. Canola alone is a $13.6 billion industry in Canada, and its importance to the U.S. cannot be overstated. If Canada imposes tariffs on this critical crop, the U.S. could see prices for meat and dairy products skyrocket by as much as 8 to 12%. For American consumers, this would mean a sharp increase in grocery bills, hitting middle-class families the hardest. From meat to dairy to baked goods made with canola oil, the impact of such tariffs would be felt directly in the pockets of everyday people. With inflation already running high in the U.S., rising food prices would only add to the financial burden faced by American families. The economic consequences of the US-Canada trade war are more profound than just tariffs and trade disruptions. They are part of a larger strategic shift in Canada's approach to the world. As US tariffs become more unpredictable and tensions escalate, Canada is looking beyond its traditional ally and forging new trade alliances with Europe and Asia. In recent months, Canada has initiated talks with European nations like France and the United Kingdom, negotiating deals in energy and the automotive sector. This signals a major pivot in Canada's trade policy, as the country looks to diversify its trading partners and reduce its reliance on the US. In Prime Minister Carney's words, "We will need to dramatically reduce our reliance on the United States. We will need to do things previously thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen." This aggressive pivot to Europe and Asia is already yielding results. Canada is negotiating long-term agreements that reduce its dependence on the US market and secure stable trade deals with new partners. This move not only threatens the economic power of the US, but also shifts the dynamics of global trade in Canada's favor. While Canada strengthens its position on the global stage, the US is grappling with increasing uncertainty at the highest levels. President Trump's leadership is under scrutiny, and questions are arising about his capacity to manage these growing tensions. The latest wave of criticism comes from Adam Kinzinger, a former congressman and military veteran. Kinzinger, who served in Iraq, has been outspoken in his assessment of Trump, calling him a coward for his inaction during the January 6th Capitol riots. Instead of taking decisive action to restore order and protect democracy, Trump sat idly by, watching the chaos unfold from the comfort of his dining room. Kinzinger, drawing on his own military experience, emphasized that true leadership requires the courage to take responsibility, something that Trump failed to do. In the eyes of critics, Trump's behavior during that crisis exposes a fundamental weakness in his leadership style, one that Canada is keenly aware of. As the US faces increasing economic pressure, Trump's fragile ego and inability to act decisively raise serious doubts about his ability to handle global crises. As tensions rise between the US and Canada, the broader global economy is feeling the ripple effects of the escalating trade war. The EU and Canada have both retaliated against the US's aggressive tariffs, with Canada's retaliatory measures amounting to a staggering $30 billion worth of tariffs on US goods. This includes everything from steel and aluminum to consumer goods, and its impact is already visible. Just a month after the tariffs were imposed, the US steel industry recorded an 8% drop in production. The knock-on effects are being felt throughout the manufacturing sector, with costs skyrocketing for industries reliant on raw materials like steel and aluminum. These rising costs are being passed on to consumers, driving up prices on everything from cars to appliances. More worrying, however, is the loss of confidence in the US economy. Experts from major financial institutions like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs warn that the S&P 500 has dropped by 12%, signaling investor unease. This economic instability has the potential to push the US into a recession, affecting businesses, consumers, and workers alike. In a move that has stunned both Canada and the US, President Trump recently announced a 50% tariff on all Canadian imports. The conditions for removing this tariff? Canada must become the 51st state of the US, a shocking and deeply unprecedented demand. The economic ramifications of this move could be devastating for both nations. With such a drastic tariff in place, oil prices, which are heavily influenced by Canadian oil exports, could soar, pushing up the costs of manufacturing and transportation across the US. Additionally, inflation could jump by as much as 1.8% in just a few months, exacerbating the financial struggles of American consumers. Corporate America is already sounding the alarm. Apple, General Motors, and Tesla have all warned that these tariffs will disrupt global supply chains, raise consumer prices, and slow production. For US manufacturers, these tariffs could lead to a rise in costs, with prices for new cars potentially increasing by $2,500 to $4,000. In response to increasing pressure from the US, Canada is shifting its focus, and it's no longer just about protecting its trade relationship with the US. Canada is now positioning itself to become a major player in the Asian energy market. With Asia's demand for energy expected to rise dramatically, China alone is projected to consume 15 million barrels of oil per day by 2040, nearly double Canada's entire output. Canada is expanding its energy infrastructure to meet this growing demand. The Trans Mountain Pipeline, which transports oil from Alberta to the Pacific coast, is being expanded to triple its capacity, enabling direct exports to Asian markets. At the same time, Canada is investing in LNG, liquefied natural gas facilities, such as the $40 billion LNG Canada project in British Columbia. These moves will not only reduce Canada's dependence on the US, but also enable the country to tap into long-term energy agreements with China, Japan, and South Korea. The escalating trade conflict between the United States and Canada has begun to manifest in significant economic indicators. In March, Canada's manufacturing sector contracted at an accelerated pace, with the S&P Global Canada Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, dropping to 46.3 from 47.8 in February. This decline marks the lowest level since December 2023 and underscores the mounting challenges faced by Canadian manufacturers amid the expanding trade war. The contraction is largely attributed to the widening of trade tensions, particularly following the U.S. administration's announcement of a 25% tariff on imported vehicles. This move has disrupted established supply chains and led to a sharp decline in new orders, reaching the lowest point since May 2020. The uncertainty surrounding these tariffs has dampened export trade and fueled inflationary pressures within the manufacturing sector. The automotive sector stands at the epicenter of the trade dispute, facing immediate and profound challenges. President Donald Trump's enforcement of a 25% tariff on imported vehicles and auto parts is poised to reshape the industry's landscape. Experts warn that these tariffs will lead to immediate price increases and disrupt established supply chains, given that the U.S. imports about half of the vehicles it sells. Consumers are already feeling the impact, with car dealerships experiencing a surge in sales as buyers rush to purchase vehicles before prices rise. In the New York area, dealerships reported a 15% increase in sales as consumers sought to avoid anticipated price hikes of 10% to 12%. However, this spike in demand is unlikely to be sustainable, and the long-term effects may include reduced vehicle affordability and potential job losses within the automotive sector. Industry leaders have expressed concerns that these tariffs could backfire, leading to higher car prices and potential retaliation from trading partners. The immediate effect is an increase in vehicle prices, with estimates suggesting an average rise of at least $6,000 per car. This escalation threatens to reduce competition and may lead to a decrease in car sales, adversely affecting both consumers and manufacturers. As the trade war intensifies, both the U.S. and Canadian economies face uncertain futures. The manufacturing sector's contraction in Canada and the automotive industry's challenges in the U.S. highlight the interconnectedness of North American economies and the profound impact of trade policies on everyday consumers and businesses. Navigating this complex economic landscape of 10% to 12%. However, this spike in demand is unlikely to be sustainable, and the long-term effects may include reduced vehicle affordability and potential job losses within the automotive sector. Industry leaders have expressed concerns that these tariffs could backfire, leading to higher car prices and potential retaliation from trading partners. The immediate effect is an increase in vehicle prices, with estimates suggesting an average rise of at least $6,000 per car. This escalation threatens to reduce competition and may lead to a decrease in car sales, adversely affecting both consumers and manufacturers. As the trade war intensifies, both the U.S. and Canadian economies face uncertain futures. The manufacturing sector's contraction in Canada and the automotive industry's challenges in the U.S. highlight the interconnectedness of North American economies and the profound impact of trade policies on everyday consumers and businesses. Navigating this complex economic landscape will require careful policy considerations and international cooperation to mitigate adverse effects and promote sustainable growth. The U.S.-Canada trade war is rapidly escalating, and both countries are rethinking their economic futures. As Canada asserts its economic strength and diversifies its trade relationships, the U.S. faces uncertainty in the face of increased tariffs and economic instability. The big question now is, will the U.S. back down, or is this the start of a new, more dangerous economic war? Only time will tell. Stay tuned. This story is far from over.